Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for this evening's Friendship Heights Sector Plan Community Kickoff, the virtual meeting. We are going to give people just a few minutes to join us, and we will be getting started in just a few, so hang tight. Okay, we are at 7:03. I'm sure some people are still going to be joining us, but we're going to go ahead and get started. Good evening. My name is Molly Jamison Juarez. I work with Brick and Story. We are engagement consultants with Montgomery County Planning for the Friendship Heights Sector Plan. And you are in the right place if you are here for the community kickoff meeting. We're really excited to have you here tonight. Thanks so much for taking the time out of your evening to be with us. We've have a special evening with some information sharing for you all, but also some good opportunities for you to give us some feedback and ideas later on. And so we're excited for that. Before we get started, just a few reminders. I know most of us are used to the virtual world that we now live in, but if you can please try to keep yourself on mute if you're not talking. We'd love for you to come on camera if you can, especially during the breakout discussions later on. If you have a question, you can come off mute, you can raise your hand, you can write it in the chat box. We encourage you to use the chat box during the presentation. That's a great way for us to record all of the questions. We'll answer them. If they aren't answered during the presentation, we're going to do some Q&A after the breakout rooms. And if they don't get answered then either, because we have too many, we're also planning to do a written Q&A with all the questions that come in. So please don't be shy with questions as we go. If you get kicked out of the meeting, it's not a problem. The same way that you got in at the beginning, you'll be able to get back in. So find that link and rejoin us. As you may have noticed, we are recording this evening's session, and this recording, both of the presentation that we're about to have, as well as each of the discussions in the breakout rooms, these will all be posted on the Sector Plan website so that those who weren't able to join can view. If you would like to use closed captioning, you should see that option on the Zoom menu. There should be a box with CC for captions in it. Just go ahead and click on that and it will turn it on for you. If you have any other questions, thoughts, we want this to be an interactive time. So we invite you to participate fully in the breakout groups with the caveat that we want to be able to hear from everyone. So if you've already had a chance to speak, give your neighbor a chance before you step back in again. We want to have some vibrant discussion later on, and we hope you all will participate. But thank you so much for being here. I'm going to pass it over to the Montgomery County Planning team, and thanks again.
Thank you so much, Molly. Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming. We've got a big crowd tonight, and we're really excited to have you all here. My name is Atara Margulies. I'm the project manager for the Friendship Heights Sector Plan, and I'm a master planner in the Down County Division. Before I jump in to this presentation, we've got a lot of members of the planning team here tonight who are here to facilitate great and exciting discussions about Friendship Heights with all of you. And so before I get going and talk about what else is going to happen tonight, I would like the members of the planning team to turn their cameras on and introduce themselves briefly so everybody can get to see the breadth of folks that we've got here. And then, of course, when we go into breakout sessions, you'll get to know the staff in your room a bit better. Larissa, take it away.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. Thanks for being here. My name is Larissa Clevin. I'm the Master Plan Supervisor for Down County.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Ronetta Zach Williams. I am the Transportation Planner for Down County.
Tina?
Oh, sorry. Good evening, everybody. My name is Tina Schneider, and I'm the Environmental Planner.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Tyler Milam, and I'm the Urban Designer with Down County.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Lisa Cavoni, and I work on housing policy in our Countywide Planning and Policy Division.
Hi, I'm Darcy Buckley, and I work on transportation in our Countywide Planning and Policy Division.
Oh, I'm Jesus Beck. I do schools. I'm part of the Countywide Planning and Policy Division.
Good evening, everyone. My name is James Lee, and I'm with the Research and Strategic Projects Division, and I work on demographics.
Good evening, everybody. I am also with Research and Strategic Projects, Alex Pemberton, and I am a real estate planner.
Hi, everybody. I'm Christina Sasaki, and I'm with the Parks Department under the Park Planning Stewardship Division.
Hello, everyone. This is Ariel Celaya. I am an environmental planner working with Dow County.
Hi, I'm Clark Larson. I'm a community planner in Up County.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Luke Savonis. I work on the Research and Strategic Projects team.
So that's the large number of planners we have on the meeting tonight to help us get through this exciting night. So what's happening tonight? And tonight we're going to first do a meet the planning team, which we've covered, and then we're going to get into a presentation. It's about 20 minutes long. I'm going to talk about the planning process, where we are in this Friendship Heights sector planning project, and where we have to go, and all the ways you can get involved. The questions, like Molly already said, should go in the chat, and we will get to a Q&A sort of at the end of this meeting, and then we'll have plenty of time to answer questions that we don't get to in the meeting. We'll send out a PDF to everyone who's here with any additional questions. So we do want to get to everyone's questions, but we do want to respect everyone's time. We are going to break out into discussion groups at the end of this presentation, and then we'll come back together at the end. We'll share a little bit about what we discussed in the presentation and talk about next steps. I will say that at the end of this presentation, we have an exit poll for you to fill out. We'll put the link in the chat, and I will also send it to everyone tomorrow. What's important about I think I have to reshare. What's important about the exit poll is that it has demographic information. We really like to know who we speak to, where it's going to ask you where you live. It's going to ask you, a bit about who you are. It's really just a few questions, but it's really crucial that everybody fill it out. When we did our in-person kickoff, we were able to hand it out to people at the end of the meeting. So we're hopeful that everyone will be able to get it from the chat. And now let's talk about what the presentation is going to cover. We're going to talk about recent planning work we've done in Friendship Heights. We're going to answer the question, what is a sector plan? We're going to talk about the sort of engagement we do during a sector plan, cover the plan schedule, and then break into discussion groups. Montgomery Planning, as many people know, is the planning department for the county. However, we are under the auspices of the Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission, a bi-county commission with Montgomery County and Prince George's County sort of together in one umbrella organization. And that includes the park department and the planning department on the Montgomery County side. People call us park and planning for that reason. We have three main job functions. We develop master plans, and that's what we're talking about today. Every area of the county is covered by a master plan. We also review development applications, which I think is what people might know about us the most, is when buildings are coming in, new projects that are sort of not single-family homes, but pretty much anything else. You have to come through a review process, and that our staff does, in order to be able to proceed and get permits. And we conduct lots of other studies and analyses about planning-related issues in the county. The map here shows the way the master plan teams are divided. We do have a county-wide team, which covers the entire county. And then we've got three teams that sort of break the county up into geographic areas. This plan is being done by the Down County team. We're in the purple at the bottom, which covers basically the area between DC and the Beltway. Obviously, that includes Friendship Heights, but also Bethesda, Silver Spring, the rest of Chevy Chase, Tacoma Park, etc. So, some recent work that we completed in Friendship Heights. Earlier this year, we completed the Friendship Heights Urban Design Study. This was a study. It did not make any recommendations for future change. And we conducted it over a relatively limited period of time. We had not done any planning work in Friendship Heights in 25 years, something I'll talk about a little bit later on in the presentation. And we wanted to start the work in Friendship Heights with a study. So get into Friendship Heights to understand what is Friendship Heights today without the complexity of a sector plan. So it was an urban design study that focused on the public realm. That's where we started. The public realm are any of those public spaces in the downtown that are accessible to you as a as someone who's walking around in Friendship Heights. So that means the streets, the sidewalks, the parks, the plazas, and any other kind of open space. We talked to people over the course of several months about how they feel in Friendship Heights, what draws them to Friendship Heights, why do they spend time there, where do they go when they're there, how do they feel about these open spaces. We got a lot of interesting feedback. It's all on our website in the urban design study, which is published on the website. But for this presentation, I'm just going to run through some really key takeaways, which is going to inform our work in the sector plan. So some of the assets we identified, some of the great things that Friendship Heights has. It has amazing access to transit. Everyone here already knows this, right? The Metro Rail, lots of buses. You can pretty much go anywhere in the county from Friendship Heights, which is phenomenal. The pedestrian network is great. The sidewalks are wide. There are lots of mature tree canopy in Friendship Heights. So the pedestrian experience is one where you can, pretty cool, even on a hot day on many streets. There are a lot of green spaces scattered throughout the downtown. And that's great because it provides consistent areas for rest and shade. You don't have to walk too far in Friendship Heights to get to a park. And there are large outdoor areas for community gatherings or events. Wisconsin Avenue, despite struggling with some retail vacancies, as many places in the region have recently, it's still retaining its identity as a popular corridor and a popular place to go in Friendship Heights. We heard from folks it's one of their favorite places to walk, and it still has some of their favorite restaurants. Areas for further study. These are things we identified about Friendship Heights that maybe need a little bit more help, and this is definitely going to be stuff that we look at in the sector plan, in addition to lots of other topics. We'll get to that. The downtown is really well connected to DC, and it has a great network in itself, but it's a little bit challenging to walk from the downtown to the surrounding neighborhoods. We experienced that, but we also heard it from folks, and that's something that we'll probably study a bit in the sector plan. While there are a lot of green spaces in the downtown, they are mostly contemplative spaces where you can sit and enjoy the green, and there's nothing wrong with that at all. But people expressed interest in having a variety of different activities in the parks. There are some other parks at the periphery, like Willard Avenue Neighborhood Park, that do have some active recreation. But accessing that park from the downtown, it's not as obvious as you might think. And lots of people said they barely go there. And I think that's something we're going to try and figure out. We heard something we often hear in downtown areas in the county, which is that after dark, there's not sufficient street lighting. People feel a little bit unsafe. There's not enough visibility. Cars are speeding down Wisconsin in the middle of the night because, there's not much going on. So then if you're walking home from the metro, you might feel unsafe. And those are things that also we can address in a sector plan. And something else about the pedestrian network, which I think is exemplified in this image, is that you have a really large number of curb cuts in Friendship Heights. And I don't just mean in the commercial areas where you expect them for parking and loading. Even every residential building, or almost everyone, has a very large circular driveway. So even when you're walking on North Park, which feels quite safe and enjoyable, you are always having to make sure that you're not being interrupted by a car, which does impact the pedestrian experience. There are also no bike facilities in Friendship Heights, even though over time some have been recommended. And so you see things like what you see here. You see both a biker and a pedestrian crossing a curb cut on a busy sidewalk. Bikers on sidewalks is not great for anyone's safety. So that's also something that we'll probably take a look at. So now that we finished the study, and it really only covered those narrow topics, in a sector plan, as we'll talk about, you look at way, way more topics. But all of that work that I just talked about will inform the future work. So what is a sector plan? In Montgomery County, a sector plan and a master plan are the exact same kind of project. They are a plan that covers an area and it makes recommendations for a given plan area with regard to many topics. Sector planned areas are usually smaller and master plan areas are usually larger, but that's the only difference. They cover all of these topics no matter what kind of plan it is. So I might use the word master plan sometimes, and it's synonymous with sector plan. We will look at land use. We will look at zoning, urban design, which we started in the study, transportation, housing, parks, open spaces that are not public, economic development, the environment, historic resources, and even how any proposed sector plan recommendations could impact schools. All of these topics will start with doing an existing conditions analysis, getting our head around well, what's the situation with these issues today in Friendship Heights? We will do that for a long time, but ultimately, at some point, we will switch with the community to talking about all of these issues with regard to future recommendations. This is sort of the outline of every sector plan that we do. However, as we start our existing conditions analysis, sometimes we land on other topics that are important to a particular plan area that maybe are specific to that area, and then that gets added to the list. So while we do start with a template, it gets personalized for each plan area. Friendship Heights, of course, has a sector plan in place now, as does everywhere in Montgomery County. The existing sector plan for Friendship Heights was approved in 1998. Now that we're doing a new one, it sort of lines up with our general strategy of revisiting plans every 20 to 25 years. You might say, why do we do it in that kind of pattern? Over time, we have discovered that by the time 20 years have gone by, the vision that was written 20 years ago is kind of out of date in a lot of ways. And this has happened in many places. I'm not just talking about Friendship Heights, but Silver Spring, Bethesda, all the downtowns have sort of followed this pattern. And even many of the other areas in the county that aren't sort of specifically downtowns, like these are more urban places. And it's not just that maybe the vision, if some things haven't happened in 20 years, that's a good time to ask, well, why haven't they happened? And are they still our priorities today? The county has different priorities now. For example, the way we thought about the environment in 1998 in master planning is not the way we think about it now. The county has a climate action plan now. They have goals. And that's just one example. The county has, Vision Zero goals now about pedestrian safety. We were concerned about pedestrian safety always, but it has different goals now in terms of bikes and pedestrians. And we just have a lot of different topics that we might look at a bit differently. And so by the time 20 years goes by, it's time to look at it again. However, it's important to note that until a new plan gets adopted, which is probably 2 or more years down the road, the 1998 plan is still in effect. So it just continues all the way until the day that the new plan is approved and adopted, and then it switches. Even while we're working on this plan, the 1998 plan is still valid. In 1998, this was the boundary for the sector plan, this black dashed dot line, and I'll just talk our way through it in case the map is small for people on laptops. It starts at the border, obviously, at DC. It goes behind the collection on the edge of Chevy Chase Village, comes around, including Somerset House, goes down, capturing all of the village of Friendship Heights, and crossing over Willard to capture the whole Geico property and the Brookdale neighborhood park, and coming back down to the border. So that's what has been considered the downtown of Friendship Heights for the last 20 or 30 years even. And that's the boundary of the sector plan that's currently in place. We use that boundary as well for the study. Now, we do not have a boundary yet for this plan. As I'm about to talk about, we're at the very, very, very beginning, hence the kickoff title for this meeting. But what I can say with some conviction is that we are going to start with the 1998 boundary as our starting point for a new boundary. It may stay the same, it may evolve, but certainly everything that was included in this boundary on the screen, we are expecting that to still be included in this new plan. So just to cover very briefly some key recommendations of the 1998 plan so you can appreciate things that have happened and changed Friendship Heights and some things that were proposed but never happened. And I think that's a great way to realize this is how sector plans kind of go. We'll come up together with the community with lots of great ideas. Some of them will happen relatively quickly. Some of them will take some time. And some of them will take steps towards realization, but won't ever get there. And then, by 20 years go by, you say, okay, let's take another look. So the development of Wisconsin Place and the redevelopment of the collection along Wisconsin are 2 major recommendations that came out of the sector plan, and they were realized today in basically the way they were recommended in 1998. So those are 2 really big successes in terms of implementation. A major recommendation of the 1998 plan, as I think a lot of people here are aware, was the redevelopment of the Geico parcel. The plan proposed parks and new housing and new commercial space, and Geico went ahead and got a plan approved in 2002, so pretty much right after the plan was approved, for a redevelopment project. That plan that they had is still valid today, but obviously nothing has ever happened. There's been no implementation or move towards that over the past 25 years. So I guess, a good question for us all these days as we get started with this work is why not? There were lots of pedestrian network and bicycle network improvements that were proposed in the last plan. Some of the pedestrian ones were implemented, some of the bicycle ones were not implemented. And there was a lot of new parks that were proposed. Some of them came to be, and some of them totally did not come to be. And there are still buildings now where those parks were recommended. So there's really a wide range of things that get recommended in terms of what gets implemented in the end of the day. There are, we recommend things in the plan, but it's up to our partners, both public and private, to pick up those recommendations and move them forward. Now we're going to talk about the sector plan process. The main takeaway from this slide is that the sector plan process is long. What you're seeing here represents more than 2 years of work in terms of these boxes. And I'm going to talk through it at a high level. And then, I'm always happy to answer questions about this if people need. So we're at the very beginning. We're in the pre-scope spot right here. All of the blue boxes represent work that the planning staff will do, much of it along with the community, because every time there's an orange star, that means there's an opportunity for the community to engage with us and participate with us in the planning process. So all of this is work, and I'll talk about it more in a bit, that the planning staff does. That's probably a year and a half. Then eventually when we have a draft, it goes to the planning board for review, and then it eventually goes to the county council for review. So that's the high level look. To get into it a bit more, the first major action in a sector plan is establishing a scope of work and establishing a plan boundary. And that happens at the planning board. But before we do that, we spend time meeting the community, getting out there in front of stakeholders, explaining that we're starting a plan, explaining the process, just getting people thinking about Friendship Heights, telling us a little bit about their thoughts and hopes and dreams or concerns about Friendship Heights. Because all of that will help inform staff's writing of a proposed scope of work and proposing a plan boundary. We will bring that to the planning board, and then they have to approve it in order for us to go into any further steps. So the great thing about the pre-scope work is that now you guys all know that this is something that's coming up probably in about 2 to 3 months. We will be sending everyone an e-letter about that when we get closer. So you'll be able to review that even before before the board sees it. Then after the board approves it, we will jump into our existing conditions analysis, which takes several months. I talked about that earlier. We look at all those topics that were on my what is a sector plan slide, land use, zoning, housing, parks, et cetera, get the lay of the land today. Just get our head around what is Friendship Heights today. We also do a deep dive into the demographics and the market conditions. We have a market consultant on this team that will be helping us with that as we get there. We do that for several months. We will present our findings to the community, bring everybody along. And then we get to the really exciting part, visioning. That's where we do a lot of engagement with the community, and we start crafting the vision for the future of Friendship Heights. That takes a few months. And then finally, we start writing our preliminary recommendations, our initial ideas about what some recommendations can be to help us get to that vision. We are not going to get to this preliminary recommendation step until about a year from now. So that gives you some sense of timing. This whole first row takes about a year, and then the same thing for the second row. Lots of versions of the draft. Eventually, it goes to the planning board, and they set a public hearing so that the draft is out there for 30 days. People can submit comments. They can come up with testimony. They can bring their own ideas to the public hearing. Then the planning board will put its stamp on the draft. And then that whole process repeats itself at the county council. The executive and branches do their own review. The council has a public hearing as well. Same process. Then they review it both in committee and in the full council. And then when the council is satisfied with all of the work that has come before them, then they approve it, and then it goes back to another body for adoption. So then that sort of happens simultaneously. I will say that after that, which is not on the slide, there is an entirely separate process that takes a few months to go ahead and physically change the zoning. If there is a zoning change proposed in the plan, that's not on here, but that's even a few more months, which is to say that it's a very long process and we're right in the beginning. And I'm really glad you're all here in this meeting. So now you have a sense of the long haul that it is. And hopefully I've given you a sense of one of some of the really important times for the community to get involved, which I would say is visioning after this initial process. So what kind of engagement do? We strive to achieve as equitable of an engagement process as possible. And this is true in all of our sector plans. We consider stakeholders to be everyone who lives, works, eats at a restaurant, shops, goes to the doctor, visits family, goes to Whole Foods every week in Friendship Heights. So any of those things make you a stakeholder. If you spend any kind of significant time in Friendship Heights, you are a stakeholder. I cannot tell you the number of times we sat at a table in front of the Whole Foods giving out flyers and people said, oh, no, I just work here. This isn't for me, but it is for you. And I hope you should pass that message along to everyone you know. If you live around Friendship Heights, but this is your downtown, you're a stakeholder and we want to hear from you. So we will do a bunch of things in order to try and meet you in as many places as we can. We will hold our own meetings like these kickoff events, the in-person one right before Thanksgiving, where we had around 70 people come to the rec center, or this meeting right here, which is basically the same meeting in a virtual format. We will also come to your meetings and events. We have come to many of the meetings of community groups in and around Friendship Heights, many different municipalities. We've been to the village many times already, in addition to the other groups around Friendship Heights, Brookdale, Somerset, Chevy Chase, etc. And we'll come as many times as you want. We're always happy to come. We'll try and replicate everything we do in person that we are initiating virtually as well to make sure everyone has an opportunity to participate. We will also have web-based participation later on in the project when we're doing visioning that won't necessarily require you to attend a Zoom meeting. So there'll be things you can weigh in on or answer questions about, or a survey, things like that you can do on your own time. I'm always around. I'm happy to talk to anybody at any time. And that's true for pretty much everyone on our planning team as well. And of course, we'll close with my contact information. So you can reach out to me whenever you want. I'll talk on the phone to anybody about anything in Friendship Heights at any time. And we have an e-letter. What's really important is if you haven't signed up already and you want to follow this process, you have to be on the e-letter. That is the #1 way we send important information out. We do not send a ton of emails. We will send them when there's new things posted on the website, when we've reached a new plan milestone, when we're about to go to the planning board and we have material posted and we want you to weigh in. And so those are the times we send e-letters. And so it'd be great if people can sign up, and there'll be information about how to do that at the end. So what about the plan boundary? That's everybody's question, and I totally get why that's the question. As I said, no boundary yet. We have a little bit more of this pre-scope engagement to get through before we take everything we heard and let it inform what we're thinking about what the boundary should be. But the 1998 boundary will be the starting point, and it won't be established until we go to the planning board. However, we have established one thing. The plan boundary is the area in which all of the recommendations apply. So once we get to that plan boundary, if you're in the boundary, the recommendations apply to that property, and those that are out of the boundary, they do not apply. There has to be a hard line somewhere in a master plan. But we can't plan any area in a vacuum, particularly when you're planning a dense downtown that's pretty small, like Friendship Heights. You have to understand the context, even if it's just for your existing conditions work. So in order to do that, we have to draw a line much farther so that we can understand the context for the plan. That we call the sector plan context study area. So this red dashed line, and yes, it goes into DC because this is just for existing conditions context. And it's really about demographics, and it's really about transportation. We don't look at every single thing on that list in this larger area, but when it comes to demographics, it's so important to understand the context, right? And not just look at the tiny downtown, but to understand the broader context, and transportation even more so. When we look at transportation, we always want to know what traffic is coming in and through the downtown, but therefore we have to know where it's coming from. And you have to draw the line somewhere because we can't analyze the whole county. So we sort of went about an equidistant out. And the reason why it has this weird boundary is because it's based on census tracts and something called a transportation area zone, which is kind of like a census tract for transportation data. So we know that this is going to be our larger context, and we're starting to pull some data inside here just to understand the context for the plan. But I'll say again, this red dashed line is not the plan boundary. It is big on purpose because we want to get all this context information about the surrounding neighborhoods. We certainly want to understand the DC context. It's very important for this for Friendship Heights. Friendship Heights is such a unique area. It's, you know, it's what feels like its center is basically on the boundary. And I will add here, because people always ask, we are in regular communication and collaboration with our colleagues in DC Office of Planning. We know that they recently published a Wisconsin Avenue Development Framework that looks at Wisconsin from Friendship Heights all the way down to Tenleytown. We've read it. We've met with them about it. I even attended some of those engagement events about 2 years ago. And when we knew this kind of work was on our work plan, we're in regular contact with them. We meet with them monthly. They know everything we're doing. We know everything they're doing with regard to Friendship Heights. And that's something people always ask us. And it's important for me to say is that, yes, even though we wish in a perfect world we could plan Friendship Heights, Maryland and Friendship Heights, DC together, because they really feel seamless in a lot of ways. The zoning and land use codes are so different and the process for DC and Maryland that we can't do that, but we are trying to be as collaborative as we can, given like the legal limits. So this is just a quick glance at the schedule. It's mirroring exactly what we talked about before. The really important things to pay attention to are just the top three. We're doing this now, and sometime in the first few months of 2025, we'll have that scope and boundary conversation at the board, and they'll approve something. And then we'll move into the other phases that I talked about earlier. We do not anticipate even sending this to the council before the spring of 2026. And then it's many months later till it's approved. So like I said, long process. Okay, we are at the end of the presentation. Hopefully people put some questions in the chat. If you did, somebody from my team is capturing those questions so that I will be able to answer them when we come back together as a group. Right now, Brick and Story, our great engagement consultants, is going to send us into breakout rooms. So everyone just hold on. There'll be a pop-up. You might have to, they'll tell you where you're going. And then you'll just boom, you'll be there. We'll let everyone get settled. We'll start this discussion, which there's 4 questions. We're going to, like we said, we're going to have a little group discussion, and then we'll come back together. Each group, the staff in each group is going to share really briefly a little bit about what they talked about with regard to one question. We'll do the Q&A, and then we'll talk about next steps. If for some reason you get kicked out and you can't get back in through your link, Emily is going to be our tech support from Brick and Story. That's her email. If you really get stuck, send her an email and she will get you where you need to go. But even if you get kicked out of the breakout room, if you come back into the main link in the email I sent you this morning, Brick and Story staff will be in there to help send you to the right room. So with that, I'm going to close and we'll let the breakout room excitement begin.